Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for making the time to join us this morning. I hope all of you are keeping well and as excited as I am for the launch of Mobility Outlook's e2W Electric Two-Wheeler Summit, India's first dedicated electric two-wheeler summit powered by Hottinger, Bruel and Kaya. My name is Atul from Mobility Outlook, and I would like to thank our gold partners, Lucas TVS, ANSYS, Infineon, and Editas, our association partner, Society of Manufacturers of Electric Vehicles, and co-partner, Sayeta VNA. Over the course of today and tomorrow, we will have a variety of engaging and informative sessions and discussions on the electric two-wheeler ecosystem in India. And I am very, very excited to hear what all of you will have to say today. Indeed, the future is electric. I would like to invite my colleague, Mr. Dipanshu Dev Sarma, editor, Mobility Outlook, to commence the inaugural session with the welcome address. Over to you, Dipanshu.
Thank you very much, Atul. Greetings, everyone. At Mobility Outlook, our journey to explore and trace the transition to sustainable mobility began exactly 14 weeks back. While we have made a strong start with our coverage of the mobility ecosystem, mainly across the automotive and aerospace domains, we have also made small beginnings with our events. This, ladies and gentlemen, is our first major event looking at the electric two-wheeler sector. I would like to begin by thanking each one of you for participating in this two-day event. We have over 3,200 registrations, and for a virtual event of this kind, it just shows how important the subject is and how curious the industry is to know about new developments in this area. The Indian e-two-wheeler space is clearly at its most exciting phase. Growing pollution levels in several Indian cities, steady rise in fuel prices, rapid urbanization, traffic congestion, and environmentally conscious citizens will likely drive EV adoption in the country over the next few years. Add to that the increasing policy level support that is coming into the sector, be it the FAME 2 scheme, call for higher localization, push to build a robust charging infrastructure, and our positive developments. In addition, of course, to the central government initiatives, states too have been framing their own EV policies. In fact, just 2 days back, Maharashtra became the latest Indian state to announce its own EV policy. Manufacturers also continue to build scale. Hero Electric, for instance, has announced a rupees 700 crore investment recently, while new entrant Ola Electric has committed a rupees 2,400 crore mega factory in Tamil Nadu, which promises to roll out one electric scooter every 2 seconds. There is promising work being done in the areas of batteries, motors, and electronics as well. During the course of these 2 days, I can assure you, you will have the right perspectives on not just the overall sector, but on specific areas of product, design, batteries, motors, the retail area, as well as policy. Starting with this inaugural session, we are extremely delighted and honored to have 3 very special guests. The inaugural address will be delivered today by Mr. Naveen Munjal. He is the Managing Director of Hero Electric and the President of SMEV, followed by a keynote address by Mr. Nagesh Basavanhalli. He is the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer with Greaves Cotton. And finally, we will have Mr. Rajeev Singh, Partner and Automotive Leader at Deloitte India, offering a deeper perspective on the e-two-wheeler sector. Gentlemen, welcome to Mobility Outlook's e-two-wheeler Summit 2021. Time permitting, we shall also engage in a quick discussion with our speakers today. So if you have any questions for our speakers in the inaugural address, inaugural session, do send them in using the Q&A panel in the platform. Apart from the 2 technical sessions, we have 2 very important panel discussions lined up as part of the e-two-wheeler summit. The first panel is slated to be held a little later in the day today, and that is on Vision 2030, making e-two-wheelers the norm in the country. But the second one is slated for tomorrow morning, and that will take a look at EV retail, developing an appropriate go-to-market strategy. Tomorrow, we would also have a special address by Ms. Mahu Acharya. She is the Managing Director and CEO of Convergence Energy Services Limited, a Government of India initiative, followed by valedictory addresses by Mr. Chetan Maini, Founder and Vice Chairman, Sun Mobility, and Mr. Sohinder Gill, Global CEO, Hero Electric, and Director General at SMEV. Moreover, we have a virtual exhibition with participation from EV manufacturers as well as EV technology companies, and I would urge you, I'd request you not to miss out on checking them out in our exhibition section. Please do join in for all these sessions over the next 2 days for a deeper insight and understanding on a variety of EV relevant subjects. Before I invite our guests for their addresses, please allow me a moment to thank all our partners and sponsors for believing in this program and also believing in Mobility Outlook. Thank you, SMEV, our association partner. The E2W Summit is also powered by HPK, and we have Lucas TVS, Ensys, Infineon, and ITAS as our gold partners, and Saita VNA as our co-partners. Thank you all for your support. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, I declare the summit open and would now like to invite Mr. Naveen Munjal for his inaugural address. Mr. Munjal, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Dipanshu. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you, Atul, for the introductions. Pleasure to see you again, Rajeev and Nagesh. Hope you all are well. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure being here today. So to answer to basically, I couldn't be more excited. I mean, I'm extremely excited about the developments, what's happening in the EV sector. I was in fact talking to our team and talking to them about that this is absolutely the best time for any, I mean, I've never seen this level of disruption that's going to come in for any industry. You've got the center pushing you and you've got various states pushing you, and all of them pushing you in one direction, that is to go towards electrification. So this is a very, very exciting time from a perspective of where the country is pushing you, where the government is pushing you. Now let's look at the market. The market is quite small, even so far as of last year. So it's only about 1% of the total IC engine industry market. But I believe that there's going to be a tremendous shift that's going to come, and the market is going to start shifting towards electric. And within electric, some of the challenges that we had till earlier are going to be addressed. Now, some of those challenges being that till last year, a large part of the market was actually a low-speed market. Now, what happens in a low-speed market is that these are unregistered vehicles, so they're non-financed. That was about 70% of the market. What we anticipate happening going forward is a shift because of the policies that have come into place. There's going to be a shift from the low speed to the city speed categories. And city speed categories are 45, 55 kilometer speed vehicles, which will be registered, thereby qualifying for financing. And thereby that's going to give another push in this whole sector. So what is happening is this one change in the policy, which was the FAME policy, which had been in place for 2 years, 10,000 crores allocated for it, 1 million two-wheelers on the road, 500,000 three-wheelers on the road, 55,000 cars and 7,000 buses. That was the broad target. So 2 years on, there is an amendment. We've gone from 10,000 rupees per kilowatt hour to 15,000, and the capping of 20% has gone up to about 40%. So what this is triggered is that there's going to be a transition happening into the commuter segment category, which earlier was a very small part of the whole EV sector. So Indian policies right now are probably amongst the best in the world when it comes to the incentivization that the government is doing, both at the center and state. On top of that, we've got the various PLIs. We've got the PLI for the advanced battery systems, which is again a very, very interesting one. And we're going to see a lot of battery manufacturing happening here, but it will take time. That's something that's going to be a process to it. We need to justify the volumes and we need to set up those plants, etc. I believe there are a number of contenders already for setting up those battery manufacturing plants. The second is in the manufacturing sector itself. So there is a PLI for the automotive manufacturing. Now, all of these actually are good triggers for this industry to really take off. So from a governmental standpoint, there's a lot of work which is already gone in. There's a lot of work which is already done. And now it's up to the industry to really grow this market. Now, what we believe the market, how this market is going to shape up going forward, is that this market will probably be about 20% of the total IC industry market in the next 5 years. So by 2026, we can easily see this industry being at about 4 million units. The numerous factors for it, the initial purchase price because of these policies has come down. With the petrol prices increasing, the gap in TCO has increased substantially. So even earlier there was a gap, but now that gap has widened hugely. To give you a perspective, if you are a user who's using a vehicle, let's say you're buying an electric vehicle, a city speed vehicle at about 65,000 rupees. And then you've got about an IC engine vehicle on the other side about 75 or 1,000 rupees. If you're using a vehicle for about 50 kilometers a day, you're looking at 1 liter of fuel at about 100 rupees, and you're looking at 1.5 units of power at about 12 rupees per day. That's the basic difference in the running cost, which makes a very interesting story. Besides all of these, besides the economics, when you look at it, even from an environmental impact standpoint, when we look at it, we've got 12 of the 15 most polluted cities, and we look at the oil dependency. All of these factors are where we're going to start transitioning towards electric. We've already seen the battery prices dropping substantially in the last 10 years. Battery prices are down to about $150 per kilowatt hour. There are projections of this going down to even less than $100. But I believe, it's going to be more at about $100 to $110. And even at that point, it makes ample sense for electric mobility as against the current IC industry. Now, when you look at other factors, there are numerous other factors also which are coming into play. So there's a lot of localization which is already happening. I spoke about the batteries, but besides the batteries, the entire supply chain is now falling in place. We had a huge concern with this category, with the supply chains falling in place a number of years back. But I've seen in the last 3 years or so that there is a substantial, not just interest, but there's actually money on the table. So companies are investing heavily into building the supply chains, whether it is for mechanicals or it's for electricals. And the level of innovations that are being done, whether we look at it from an IoT standpoint or smart connectivity, etc., are very, very interesting and very good. So this is a huge shot for the EV sector, what has happened in the last number of weeks. This year is going to be remembered as being the catapult year. This is going to really catapult this industry into a very different stratosphere going forward. And year 2021 is really going to be the beginning of that. So going forward, we're going to see exponential growth year on year. We're going to see multi-time growth year on year, and that we have complete confidence in.
Thank you for your inaugural address. Clearly, there's a lot of positive energy that one can see in terms of what you've shared. Favorable government policies, of course. You've said that India possibly has one of the best, most favorable incentive-based policies in the world as far as electric vehicles are concerned. You've talked about the country, the sector, to a 4 million sort of level by 2026, and based on current levels, that's almost a 7 to 8-fold growth that we are looking at over the next 5 years. Fantastic opportunity. And, thank you so much for your address. I would now request Mr. Nagesh Basavanhalli, MD and CEO of Greaves Cotton, to deliver your keynote address, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Dipanshu. Hope you can hear me well. Great.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Thank you. Continuing from where Naveen ji was talking about, I would like to start off with kind of humanizing this. What is electric mobility? Let's go back to a daily earner in New Delhi who recently, post-COVID, went to Patna, right? It was his hometown. He bought one of our electric mobility e-rickshaws, right? Where he was able to earn as much as he did in New Delhi and still stay close to home, still have a better standard of living, thanks to the advent of electric mobility e-rickshaws at the bottom of the pyramid, which are giving livelihoods to a lot of people. Point number one. Point number two, all of us, thanks to COVID, are getting food, their home deliveries from your favorite vendors, right? Whether it is the Swiggy, Zomatos, or the Amazons, or the big baskets, right? You name it. Guess what that is shifting to? Thousands of those scooters are getting shifted to electric mobility. So a lot of your goods that are coming in via your favorite app are coming in through electric mobility solutions, right? This is a two-pronged effect. Not only are we seeing a transformation of how we view mobility, it's also bringing in development at the grassroots, providing opportunities for livelihood and improving lives of people. So with that initial, what does it mean and how do we humanize it? Let's talk a little bit. I totally agree with Naveen's comments. I think the future is electric. There has been a steady increase in the demand, obviously from a small base. Why? Because I think the cost economics are there, right? In terms of TCO, higher productivity over a period of time, especially for a lot of our B2B consumers. And I would categorize this into maybe 5 key buckets if I can, and I'll go through that very quickly. The first bucket is probably the favorable government policies, like Naveen talked about. I think whether it is the central government or recent state government, I think the recent FAME 2 was a great example, right? What we also like about that is, in addition to the subsidy, it was also about product localization, which in turn develops the local supply chains and the local industry, which obviously translates to more employment, right? So how do we continue to do that? I think so the policies are favorable. Second point is the consumer behavior. Obviously, COVID-19 has taught us a couple of things. One of them is clearly personal mobility over shared mobility, right? And when it comes to short or medium distance, so the personal mobility gains are also being seen on the electric mobility increases, right? The third in more particular order is smart cities, obviously improving road infra, and the government encouraging better quality of roads, charging stations along the way. Recently, I was coming back from our plant in Ranipet to Bangalore, and guess what I see? I stopped for a coffee and I see a charging station. You would have not seen that a while ago, right? So things are happening as we speak, right? The fourth one is, in some cases, especially in some markets like Goa, you see sustainable tourism. Sustainability is no longer a fad word. It's lifestyle that more and more people are embracing, especially as we look at our millennials and our Gen Z customers, right? And so this is not also local, it's also global. For example, I was reading somewhere where Monaco recently announced a campaign that green is the new glam, where green energy, shared electric vehicles and bicycles, how they're going to drive that campaign, right? Fifth, the startup ecosystem. It's a great, exciting time to be, whether you are in Bangalore or in Gurgaon or wherever, in most of the cities, IIT Bombay, IIT Chennai Research Park. The startup ecosystem, I believe India has the third largest ecosystem and continues to grow, which again will propel a lot of the innovation that EV industry needs. So a lot of these, when you look at all of these 5 things, right? I believe these are all impetus. On the other hand, it would be only fair to say there are obviously challenges. I still believe EV awareness, while improving every quarter, every day, awareness of the EV industry and the sector and what it can or cannot do, I think is still a challenge. Finance availability, right? Financing options is still, it's getting better today versus it was even a year ago, but it still remains an area. Supply chain and the ability of big name suppliers to also start working with us, I think is improving, but improving by the day. And I think the FAME 2 will only improve that. So these are some of the key nuggets I would call about it, call as to what could be the potential challenges. Having said that though, how do we accelerate the demand going forward? Naveen talked about it. I think it's an exciting time. Some of the policies definitely help. But one or two other things that we are seeing is obviously technology is improving. It's also, as more and more bigger players come in, I think it motivates more EV buyers. Awareness is improving, right? Consumers have a concern of charging station, which again, like we touched upon, I think is improving day by day. And I think it will get better. I think in the case of 2-wheeler, 3-wheeler, it's not as critical as it's on the 4-wheeler, but definitely that is. Affordability is a key nugget for any buyer in the Indian mainstream, right? And so financing, financial engineering, how do you buy now, pay later, battery as a service, different type of business model, partnerships or business model re-engineering needs to happen, right? And then in addition to that, the technology, I'm a firm believer in technology, having been part of global technology centers in India. India needs to set up global R&D centers, attract not only Indian capable talent, but also the global talent that can fast track capability development. This will not only increase skilling and livelihood, but it's also obviously is going to be one of the successful modes for our EV industry. And that is how I think we'll become more robust. One of the last things that I want to talk about is some of the changes that have come in recent times, like for example, contactless purchases post-COVID. I'm told 5% of the Indian consumers now want to use digital channel, even for high value items per a recent McKinsey report. So the consumer is now more and more comfortable with online shopping, even for some consumer goods, automotive, right? And that's only increasing. So the ultimate comfort of a consumer to research, look at options, buy the products, test drive virtually, right? Which may mean reimagine the go-to-market strategy that's been around in the automotive industry for years, right? So all in all, in summary, India's EV opportunity is a chance to reskill, retool, reorient a sector that's been very important to the nation's GDP. But the implementation should be undertaken in a collaborative and in a time-specified manner with regulatory, technology, and economic clarity, so that as we transition, we are creating lives and livelihoods along the way. Thank you very much. Thanks again for inviting me.
Thank you very much for that keynote address, Mr. Basavanhalli. Truly appreciate. You've touched upon some very, very interesting topics. You've talked about 5 key enabling, a bucket with 5 key enablers. Favorable government policies, of course, consumer behavior, smart cities, very importantly, smart cities and the infrastructure that will sort of be brought into those smart cities and across the country. Sustainable tourism, that's number 4 you touched upon. Again, a very, very important factor. And of course, the startup ecosystem. While you've talked about challenges, you've also given some direction in terms of how we should look at, as an industry, look at retooling, reskilling, and also reorienting our focus in ensuring that we have the desired EV ecosystem in the future. Thank you once again for being part of this and delivering that wonderful keynote address. Our third speaker, I'll now move to Mr. Rajeev Singh. Rajeev, over to you for a deeper insight into the EV ecosystem.
Yeah, thanks, Dikanshu, and thanks a lot, Naveen and Nagesh. As always, it's always a pleasure to hear you, and a lot of insights every time we get to discuss. Good morning to everyone. Dikanshu, I had a few pages. Is it possible for me to just run through the pages, or?
Yes, Rajeev, you can use the share screen button at the
okay. So just let me know in case the pages are visible.
Yes, it is visible, Rajeev. You can go.
I'll just go in the full screen mode then.
Yeah.
So let me just start back, maybe going to the two-wheeler first, and then I'll come to electric two-wheeler. And as we heard Naveen and Nagesh speak about, we think that electric two-wheeler is really on the cusp of the growth, and it is being driven by overall a demand for two-wheelers in the market. We are seeing significant growth even in the coming years. And I think it was Nagesh who was also talking about a little shift that we are seeing from shared mobility towards personal mobility in the short term, given the health concerns and so on and so forth. But some of the drivers, like urbanization, for example, will continue to be there. And urbanization is going to be one of the key drivers from a perspective of growth in the electric two-wheeler space. We do believe that along with this urbanization, as we heard my earlier speakers also talk about last mile connectivity. So the need of scooters for the commercial applications, not just the personal use, but even for commercial applications, the B2B segment is growing significantly. And we do believe that will drive the growth for two-wheelers. Scooterization and the adoption of scooters by women, that continues to be a big thrust, and some of the organizations have done very well by focusing on that segment of ensuring free mobility or ease of mobility. Connectivity, of course, continues to be there, but what I believe is that electrification itself will be one of the levers for growth of two-wheelers. So it's not that two-wheelers is growing only because of urbanization or scooterization, but it is also electrification itself which is thrusting the growth of two-wheelers in the country. And this is something that we have seen even in other countries. So even neighboring China, if you go, you do find that the electric two-wheelers, and there the numbers are of course significantly larger, but that itself has also driven growth in the market. We do go to the consumers every few months, and the last survey that we did about a couple of months back, this was in January, and we spoke to the consumers in terms of their kind of preference and so on and so forth, and some interesting insights, some of them a kind of reinforcement and something new. A lot of reinforcement, I would say. So when we spoke to the people in terms of the reasons for adoption of electric two-wheelers or electric vehicles in general, they continue to remain around cost, and hence the lower fuel cost is predominantly the number one out there. But interestingly, people are talking about better driving experience. So as companies chart out their ways of go-to-market, probably it's a good thing to talk about in terms of the driving experience itself, because it is quieter. It is, I mean, there are no vibrations and so on and so forth. Nagesh did speak about climate, so that even Naveen speak about it, and the younger generation, the millennials particularly, are really very, very concerned, and they definitely want that look at me and set as an example, saying that, see, I am conscious about the environment, and I'm hence driving an electric two-wheeler or an electric vehicle. We do believe that that is something that is also going to drive growth. And lastly, yes, the government stimulus, the government incentives and so on, which are important, especially for an industry in the initial ages, I would say. And as time passes, I think it's the business which kind of takes over and drives growth then. However, from a perspective of the concerns, they remain to be still there, namely around charging infrastructure, safety concerns, the initial cost. And already there are a lot of business models in terms of how to ensure that affordability initially can be better, the range anxiety and so on. People did speak about also, if it is charging, where do they prefer to charge? For example, 63% of the people said that they would prefer to charge at their home, and then is work, and then our charging infrastructure which is available, say, in a mall or on streets or at any other such places and so on. But charging at home is something which is predominant still, and as more and more players keep getting into this, I think this is something that even a little bit of push from the government may be required. We were working with World Bank initially, or earlier, sorry, a couple of maybe a year back or so, and did get a chance, Naveen and Nagesh, actually to talk to a lot of government bodies or municipal corporations across different smart cities in the country, and put together some thoughts in terms of what should the municipal corporations do, or what should the town planning bodies do. For example, while they're giving approvals for residential societies or for commercial complexes and so on, and how do they make charging infrastructure as very integral to that. So some of the, I of course can't name here, but some of the municipal corporations were fairly open, and they said that they are going to make this as a mandatory thing, that if any residential complex has to be approved, then they need to have some basic compliance with respect to charging infrastructure in the basement and so on and so forth. So at least some of the cities are thinking in that direction, which is a very, very positive news, and that could help in terms of driving adoption, given the concerns around charging infrastructure. As we see, we do believe that the two-wheeler market is poised for a good growth, and whatever analysis we did, Naveen, I heard you talk about numbers. I think we are more or less there. Maybe I heard you talk more about 20% by 2025, and even our research, our analysis is indicating that we could be, out of the total, say, two-wheelers is about 30-35 million by 2030. We believe by 2025 this number could be anywhere between 12 to 20%, which is, say, 2.5 to 4 million electric two-wheelers, which is a big growth given where we are. I mean, from where we are, if I look at the growth, it's a big number. But the interesting thing is, it's looked like a good curve to be on. And as we get into 2030, the numbers seem to also go up further, more towards the two-digit numbers in terms of the total size, 10 million to maybe 14, 15 million. Now, I think that is what is attracting also more and more investments to come into this market. So we do believe that this market is going to continue to grow as time passes. I'm not getting into details in terms of the splits and so on and so forth. But coming to, we did hear a lot of growth drivers. Both Naveen and Nagesh spoke about it. Some of them are repetitive and hence I'm not talking about it, but I just wanted to talk about the demographics thing, because the family size and so on is also making adoption of these vehicles higher. One of the other things that I think some of the players may want to focus on is ensuring that this entire thing makes a lot of business sense, especially when it comes to the B2B segment. And the B2B segment could be a big growth driver the moment they find that that it makes a lot of business sense for them to move from the ICE technology to the electric technology, because it's absolutely there, ripe in the sense of their driving distance that they do on a daily basis. It's a point-to-point, and hence they definitely get back to a certain point at the end of the day. Typically, a requirement in the night is lower, so that time could be utilized from a charging perspective and so on. So if a business sense can be made there in terms of return on investment, because for them it's purely equipment, asset utilization, maintenance costs, the fuel cost or the driving cost, which are all favorable from an electric perspective. I think it all makes big sense out there. It's only a question of ensuring that the initial cost, which helps in terms of bringing down the break-even point, and as they see the break-even points come down to about 2 to 3 years time, we are seeing this, and that's the reason why on the previous slide we see that, because we do believe that this industry, two-wheeler, has come now very close to that break-even point, or is in some sense there, and it's only a question of adoption from here on. So that's what we truly believe is likely to happen. One last point I thought I just wanted to touch upon, and I did hear even Nagesh and Naveen talk about it, is the value chain that the electric two-wheelers have. Comparatively a simpler value chain, no doubt, as compared to the ICE engine. But predominantly there are 4 value streams which go into manufacturing of the vehicle. One is to do with the entire battery. The second is with the drive unit, and the third is power electronics, and the fourth is the body itself, or the chassis itself. Now, localization of these value chains will be very, very key. No doubt, I mean, the last out here, that's all completely localized, but from a cost perspective, that's not really the big number. From a cost perspective, the other 3 value chains, localization of those value chains in India will be key. Hopefully, with technology tie-ups, a little push through whatever we are hearing on ACC incentive schemes and others, probably should help. But this is going to call for a little more concerted effort, especially power electronics. It's not going to be that easy. Even battery, it's not just about producing packs out here, but doing a little more than that. So I think the key is going to be to ensure at the back end, how do we get a lot of stuff here localized, so that it's not just about cost, but it's also having complete control on the value chain. So even if there are some elements which are imported, but having control on that value chain from a supply disruption or risk perspective is going to be very, very important. Because when the numbers are small, I think those risks are not really seen. Those risks are less. But as we grow, and from that small fraction on the previous page, as you saw, as we exponentially grow, and if you're going to look at a 10 million number, say in 2030, these risks are all going to get accentuated multiple times if you don't keep an eye on the back end of the value chain. So I think that's the reason why it is going to be very, very important, because otherwise this industry can get throttled. So localization is going to be very, very important in that sense. And if it is imports, having technology tie-ups and kind of right commitments from the back end are going to be key. On the front end, we are seeing all kinds of models, but we do believe that it's going to be the D2C, which is the direct to customer, with whatever, maybe some vendors tie-ups with them in terms of whatever upkeep, maintenance, and so on. But it is going to be D2C largely. But there is going to be a lot of play for the OEMs even on the front end side, which is either to do with the charging infrastructure, or it is to some of the players who are thinking of also getting into battery in whatever manner, while we are calling only one element of battery, which is battery recycling. But there could be many other models as well, which could be a part of charging infrastructure itself, whether it is battery swapping and so on. So a lot of avenues in terms of also where OEMs could play to capture the profit pool, I would say. And this is the time when the OEMs can think differently in terms of what profit pools they would like to participate in. Because in the ICE technology, the way the value chain has come, there is a particular profit pool that the OEMs have, but they have a smaller play in the entire value chain and its profit pool. So the profit pool is distributed across the entire value chain. But in its early days, as we are blueprinting this entire industry, I think the OEMs can expand the profit pools in which they would like to play as the industry grows in the future. So with that thought, Dipanshu, I would like to hand over back to you. So that's what I thought I'll just quickly share with the larger team.
Thank you, Rajeev. Very clearly, a lot of very important insights from the consumer perspective and also concerns that consumers have as far as adopting and accepting electric mobility as the future. You've also highlighted key factors that impact the growth. And so what we clearly understand that there is both push and pull at play. Push from the government side by enabling the right policies, and the pull from the consumer side because there's a certain need for electric vehicles. And you've also talked about the importance of actually focusing a lot more on the value chain, right? And that is to do with batteries, the drive units, power electronics, and of course also body and chassis. Now, gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. We have some time, and I would request my colleagues to check if we have any questions coming in from our delegates. But in the meantime, if I may get your perspective, both Mr. Basavanhalli and Mr. Munjal, Rajiv gave us this whole idea, talk about the importance of focusing on the value chain, right? So I'd like to invite your comments on that very aspect, and also just talk about how you as individual companies and as overall industry, what should be the focus when we talk about this? Mr. Munjal, we'll start off with you.
Thank you, Dipanshu. Rajiv, very, very happy to see some of the figures that you had in your presentation. I'm glad that the numbers that you're talking about are in line with what we are talking about. I was actually referring more to 26. You're talking about 25, so that's actually better for us. But the point is, irrespective of whichever way you look at it, even if you look at your worst case scenario, you're looking at a huge market going forward from here. So you're looking at a market jumping from 150,000 units last year up to a bare minimum of 2.5 million in the next 4 years that we're looking at. So that's a substantial jump, irrespective of whichever way you look at it. Now, that said, I agree with you from an OEM standpoint, from us, as companies. There are a number of avenues there are a number of roles that we have to play. I was very happy to hear about the charging infrastructure coming in place. What we've been doing as a company is actually installing a charging infrastructure for customers. And we are actually installing it not just for our vehicles, but for the industry in some shape or form. So we've already installed about 1,600 charging stations. The idea is to take it up to 20,000. But very clearly, the customers don't really use it. It gives more of a peace of mind. So it's that wherever we install it, we find the sales go up dramatically, but the usage of that is really not there. So what happens is actually what we've done is we've adopted a model where we are partnering with the grocery stores and some other places like that, where you can actually go and park a vehicle and charge it. And for them, it's a cross sell. So they're able to sell something else to you, not really make money off the charging infrastructure that they're doing. Another very, very important factor, which is going to actually have a role to play, is going to be the reskilling of the workforce. And that, again, to an extent, we are working, but there is more work required there. So what we're doing is we are reskilling the roadside mechanics in order to handle electric, because earlier they didn't know how to handle electric vehicles. We've already trained about 6,000 of them. The idea is to take in about 25,000 of them. The whole concept behind this is that as the momentum begins to pick up, it's going to be like a stone carrier. It's just going to pick up momentum going forward. Now, in terms of the manufacturing, in terms of localization, absolutely in sync with you. Those have been some of the challenges which are there. The challenges are still there for components like batteries. And, when you look at the high volume items, because the industry, no matter what we look at, which way we look at it, the industry has been small. So last year, 150,000 units across the industry is a very, very small industry. Nevertheless, what we are finding is there is a level of interest coming in from the suppliers, from tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers. So there is a level of serious interest coming in, because what they're realizing is unless if they don't get onto this bandwagon, they're probably going to miss it, because somebody else is going to take that. And that's not the direction they want to go in. So that is, but what happens with that is there is an increase of price, rightfully so, because when we're looking at volumes, when you're looking at and even when they're looking at it from a perspective of the IC engine versus electric, the volumes are very, very different. We're just 1% of that industry at this point. So the pricing does go up. Those are some of the challenges which need to be bridged. In terms of the different profit pools that you were talking about and how the technology tie-ups, I completely agree with you. This is an industry, this is going to be a business which is highly collaborative. It's not something that, I'm going to do as a company, going to control everything and manufacture everything on my own, because the componentry is so different. The electronics, the BMS, the IoTs that are involved, the power electronics that are involved, the motors, drivetrain, etc. And from a mechanical standpoint. So you've got multiple different sectors coming in, rather than just a mechanical sector coming in from an earlier standpoint. So with these kind of technologies coming into play, collaborative is the way to go. Companies who are manufacturing batteries, for example, are the best manufacturers of batteries. We are not suitable. We are not suited to manufacturing batteries. We could assemble them, but that's a low value addition item. That's not a very high value addition item. B2B is going to be a very, very important sector going forward. We, in fact, anticipate that by 2025, it's probably going to be about 30% of the entire market, because what's happening is the challenge that exists in B2B is the aggregator model at this point of time. Now, so the person who's actually riding, who's delivering the goods to you for e-commerce or food or whatever be the case, he's doing so. He's not only getting a license, he's actually getting a vehicle with them. And generally, he's buying a much older vehicle. So how does he switch from buying a second or third hand vehicle to a higher priced electric vehicle, whereas the running cost of the electric is going to be much lower? So that shift is also beginning to happen, because what we are seeing is the number of NBFCs who are taking the plunge into this, buying the vehicles from companies like us, and then leasing those vehicles out on a monthly basis. And that works well for everybody. So there's another industry to be created here. Charging industry is going to be a very important factor. Swapping is also going to have a role to play going forward, but for certain sectors. And of course, home charging is going to remain the mainstay. So I think there is a lot of opportunity, not just for us as companies, but even our supply chain and new entrants who are coming in. There's a lot of gaps to be filled, and going forward, I believe that it's going to be a very, very interesting space to be in.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Basavanhalli, I'll just add to my previous question specific to the value chain. In fact, this is a question that we've received from one of our delegates, Mr. Sirish Bachu. He wants to know, how can we improve the local value chain in India in the face of cheaper components being sourced from China?
Yeah, so definitely. So just to summarize the very big picture, kind of just to add to what Naveen was talking about, in terms of this is going to be a collaborative game. That's why we are looking at this as the entire ecosystem. So what I mean with that is there are certain things that we are going to do, we're good at. There are certain things we're going to make, certain things we're going to design, certain things we're going to own, certain things I'm going to cooperate. We have some strategic partners that we got in very early, and we continue to do that. And as more and more capable, larger suppliers come in, I think that will just expand. I think the key thing here is, I totally agree that this problem or this opportunity, if I can call it, of solving the mobility needs of the country is a much broader issue, and it needs several of us to get together. It's not a one company trying to solve it all, right? For our own part, we have access to multi-brand sales, service, spares, mechanics, reskilling, partnership with strategic suppliers, technology, etc. Right? In terms of coming back to the specific second question that you asked about, in terms of localization and what it means, I think some of the recent moves that the government has made, especially in terms of FAME 2 or even some of the state government stuff, right? I think is in the right direction. how do we move more towards localized content? How do we engage Indian value addition? How do we bring in more and more towards bringing in partnership and absolutely increasing the value add in the country, right? What gets done in India. I think some of that is happening, especially in the case of high speed, lithium. I mean, clearly, let's be candid. The cells still come from outside India. We don't have a choice, but the battery pack and everything else, right? I mean, can be done in India, right? On the other hand, I think in a lot of areas, it's already beginning to happen. But what I would also request attention is the area of also the slow speed. Slow speed again is bring in standards, bring in safety standards, bring in localization standards, because that also spurs at the bottom of the pyramid a lot of employment, a lot of livelihoods, a lot of jobs. It's as important because not everybody can afford the high speed and then the 1.5 lakh or the 3 lakh product. India is, let's face it, India is not a very, very rich country. At the bottom of the pyramid, we also need to do and bring in the standards. I think we welcome it, the localization standards, the safety standards, the COP, whatever is needed. But I think even on the slower speed, there is an opportunity, right, both on the two-wheeler and three-wheeler, to bring in those standards and start moving towards more localization. That will, again, to Naveen's point, will encourage the suppliers to get a lot more volume, right? And as the volumes pick up, I think it will just increase the pie.
I'm so sorry. We're running out of time, but Rajiv, one quick question for you. What are your views on multi-brand sales point under one roof in the scenario where so many OEMs are coming up with such solutions? That's one of the questions from one of our audience.
No, I think that we have to visit it. I think we will require some push from the policymakers, ensure that it is made a little more easier, because as we move, I think, towards electric vehicles, let's also try and understand today, for example, I mean, the ICE technology tries to differentiate on many parameters, right? Whether it is in terms of the transmission, and you say that, okay, it's a 6-speed gearbox, or it's an automatic gearbox, or it's a manual, or it's all kinds of differentiations. They try and differentiate in terms of many other parameters in terms of driving comfort and so on. But when it is two-wheeler electric, sorry, I'm not saying necessarily two-wheelers, it could be two-wheelers, it could be three-wheelers, it could be passenger vehicles and so on and so forth. I don't think so that there is going to be too much of differentiation from a product per se. The differentiation will be more from an overall ecosystem per se, in terms of who are you collaborating with and so on and so forth. So you'll create an entire solution which is very different, service which is very different. But from a product perspective, we have to move to a model where a customer can walk in and he sees a choice, he sees a comparison, and he gets to see maybe whatever 3, 4, 5 different models under one roof. I think that is going to also give customer a lot more comfort rather than seeing just one brand at one place and so on and so forth. I think that we have to make a move. I mean, irrespective of whether it is ICE or whether it is electric, I would not say it is necessarily only for electric. It is from an overall automotive industry perspective that we have to make a move there, and we have to ensure that we get into where a customer can see multiple brands all, and customer would be the happiest when that happens. Because why would you and I not be happy if we can walk into a place where we can see all the models that we want to compare, all there under a single roof in that sense. So there are some hurdles, I would say, to get to that point. But I think that's a direction that we have to definitely get into.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rajiv. Gentlemen, thank you for being part of Mobility Outlook's E2Wheeler Summit, the inaugural session. Thank you for sharing your insights. We look forward to 2 very exciting days of deliberations, discussions, and talks. I truly appreciate, and thank you once again for being part of this.